Hi, 10th grade. It's nice to be with you again. Well, hold on, let me a second. Let me get back over here to the right screen. Yesterday, we began talking about the course of the war, World War II. We talked about a number of Axis successes. Remember, the Axis powers are Germany, Italy, Japan. Germany, Italy, Japan. Okay? But we talked about their successes, which the first one was the sweep into Poland. Now, they came directly into Poland. This was actually the beginning of World War II. Because their invasion of Poland made Britain and France both declare war on Germany. But it was a huge success, the operation of moving into Poland. We had these pictures. I'm not sure that you saw these pictures yesterday, but they are online. You can get these very easily. They're in our Google Classroom. We also talked about the invasion of Scandinavia. And how Denmark and Norway were easily conquered because of the fifth columnist. And remember the traitor named Vidkun Quisling. We also talked about the fall of France and thereby the rescue of all the soldiers off of the shores of Dunkirk. Many of you have seen the movie. It's an excellent movie. It is a true miracle, and neither the movie nor our discussion yesterday went into all of the details of why Dunkirk was so miraculous. But you're going to be working on something tomorrow in class that will help make that more of a little bit of a reality for you. We are also going to be doing a project. I'll give you details on that tomorrow as well. Okay, so this was a map drawing of what that rescue at Dunkirk looked like and how the German troops were moving in. And the last Allied the next to the last one that we talked about was the fall of France. How France fell just almost immediately after that rescue at Dunkirk. Part of that was planned by the French. I know we talked yesterday about Henri Pétain, how he was appointed the leader of like a puppet government in France. And he asked for an armistice or a ceasefire. They did that on purpose to preserve the downtown buildings of Paris. They didn't want them to be shot up and bombed to pieces. Vichy France was the free France that was trying to operate out of the southern portion of France, and it was led by Charles de Gaulle. But Charles de Gaulle had escaped, and he was in Britain under protection there. We also talked about the invasion of North Africa and how it was dependent on this man, Erwin Rommel, the leader of the German troops. Rommel had pushed across, helping Mussolini, who is the one who had originally invaded northern Africa. And then Rommel's forces, as well as Mussolini's forces, were pushed back by the British and then the Americans until they all had to leave and go to Italy. One thing we didn't talk about yesterday was the rest of Erwin Rommel's story. He's really an interesting person. He was a career officer. In 1938, he commanded a battalion that protected Hitler. And in 1940, he led the 7th Panzer Division into France. In 1941, he commanded the Axis troops in North Africa. And in 1943, he commanded Axis troops in northern Italy. But in 1944, Hitler ordered him to defend Europe from Allied invasion. So just after the D-Day invasion, his car, Erwin Rommel's car, was bombed and he was injured. So while he was at home recuperating from his injuries received in that blast, 2 German generals visited him. They told him that he had been implicated in a conspiracy to kill Hitler. Now, we don't know whether or not he was actually guilty of that, but he was implicated in it. And they gave him the choice right there on the spot. You either stand trial or you commit suicide. And he chose to commit suicide. So he swallowed cyanide right there and died at home. After his death, which was reported as an accident, Hitler ordered that he be buried with full military honors, and his wife was granted a full lifetime pension. Just interesting end to that story. Today, we're going to look at some of the Axis blunders, some of the things that the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan, did wrong. Okay. The first one we're going to talk about is the Battle of Britain. And if you are curious about how this worked, the Germans, let's talk about it first, and then I'm going to give you some other information. All right. So the Germans set up their ships in the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, trying to blockade anything from getting to it to England, to Britain, Great Britain. And then they started bombing. They were bombing daily the town of London, the other outlying towns, everything they could get to in England. And they were preparing to have an assault where they would land troops on the beaches of England, of Great Britain. But the Royal Air Force and the people of Britain were not going to have any of this. The Royal Air Force was an amazing group. They were very, very dedicated Air Force pilots. They never stopped trying to get rid of as many Panzers as they could. Not Panzers, but Luftwaffe. The people of Britain were very, very dedicated to not surrendering to the British. And part of that was the support that they got from men like Winston Churchill. He was a great leader. Part of it also was the support they got from the Americans. And that support came in several different varieties. First of all, we sent them 50 destroyers right away that we had used in World War I for them to be able to use. These were planes that they could use right away. Then we also had the Lend-Lease Act, where we promised to lend or lease. Congress okayed this for Roosevelt to do, to lend or lease anything to our allies. And our allies were considered to be those that we needed to remain free, countries that we needed. So Great Britain was, of course, one of those. The third thing that America helped with was a thing called the Atlantic Charter. And this was an agreement between Roosevelt and Churchill. These two men met. I don't remember exactly where the meeting was, but they met and they drew up this Atlantic Charter, which basically was a document that set forth the things that we had in common, things that we both countries wanted to see, which included the final destruction of the Nazi regime. Many Americans did leave and go fight with the RAF, the Royal Air Force. Some of these are posters that came out of the Battle for Britain. Keep calm and carry on. Those are quite popular these days, but they originated here in World War II. If you really want to get a good feel for what it was like in England during the Battle of Britain, there is a reality TV show that British TV did a number of years ago called the 1940s House. I've seen one full episode and part of another one or two, and they try to recreate perfectly what a 1940s house would have been like in Britain and what it would have been like for a modern day family to have to undergo some of the same restrictions that those families did. It's just interesting in light of our current situation of having to shelter in place at home. We have no problems compared to what the people in London did. They had to have all of their windows blacked out so that no light could get through on the outside of the house, and several other things. They had to grow their own gardens. Many of them had their own bomb shelters, all kinds of things like this. So we have it easy compared to what they have. But watching a modern family undergo some of those hardships was really quite amusing in the program. So I would recommend you see an episode of it. You Google it, you can find it. I think it's on Amazon, but it might be that I found it somewhere else. But I found it very easily. Okay, the second big blunder that the Axis powers made, and that we're going to go through today, this is probably the last one we'll get through, is the invasion of Russia. Now, why Hitler did not learn from Napoleon's mistakes, I don't know. Napoleon was one of the best generals the world has ever seen. Hitler was not. He was not that brilliant. But yet he should have learned from Napoleon's mistakes. But he didn't. He invaded Russia. 3 million men he took with him to invade Russia. And in what was called Operation Barbarossa, every operation, of course, had a name. He invades Russia in July, August, somewhere in there. And clearly, the Germans underestimated the Russians. They did not prepare for the weather, and they did not take into account that the Russians were going to, once again, just as they did to Napoleon, practice scorched earth policy. They're going to burn everything behind them. They're not going to leave a house. They're not going to leave a field full of vegetables for them to feed the army. They're not going to leave animals. They are going to scorch the earth behind them. So he gets into Russia. He's defeated at Stalingrad. He's defeated at Leningrad. And the Russians did receive support from both the US and Britain. So now Hitler has turned his friend, his ally, into his enemy. He attacked them, and now he's going to have to pay for that. This war, the battle for Russia, the part of the war where Germany attacked Russia, was extremely costly for both the Russians and the Germans. It was just a horrible, horrible battle. Okay, we'll get into Pearl Harbor next. But those are your updates for today. Just take your quiz afterwards. Make sure you use your notes on your quiz so you'll remember what we've gone over in class today. And one other thing I wanted to tell you is about your next project, which will be a movie review of a World War II movie. So be thinking about what you'd want to watch. I'd want you to watch something you have never seen before. Okay? All right. I'll talk to you later. Have a good day.